So the beginning of Throne of Glass, we start out up here in Endovir, and Celaena has been in the salt mines for a year. So she's working in the mines and she gets pulled out by this guard that kind of leads her on this wild goose chase, like through a bunch of hallways and stuff to try and like trick her, and ends up taking her to the throne room, and she meets Dorian, which is the Prince of Adarlan. So he basically ends up telling her, like, I have a proposition for you, and tells her about this competition that his dad is having where he's trying to get his like king's champion. So basically she would have to do all his dirty work. So they end up making a deal and basically agreeing on, after 4 years of serving the king as his champion, if she wins this, that she would be free. So she's like, all right, bet. So they go back over here to Rifthold, and Chaol is the guard, and then Duke Parrington was also with them too. And Dorian and Duke Parrington, there's some like tension between them. Like, they're friendly, but they don't like each other. So they end up getting back to the castle, and it's like this big ugly glass thing that's built on top of a stone castle, and Celaena thinks it's ugly. Dorian says it's too much, and they end up taking the night and camping outside of the city, and then in the morning they go and like parade through town to get to the castle. They take her in, get her rooms. It's like these big nice rooms, and then the next day they go and meet the king up here for initial meeting of all these champions and their sponsors, or whatever you want to call them. And he kind of tells them the rules. And so it's going to be, so there's 24 competitors. It's going to be 13 weeks, and they're going to train every day, and there's going to be like a competition each week, and then they'll be eliminated. So a couple of the competitors is Nox and Kane, and then like I didn't make pictures of all of them because that would just be too much, but these are two of the main ones here. We start training the next day. They have to go for a run. Celaena like throws up. She's not having a good time. She starts training early every morning, and she's working with Chaol, and then she's also training with all the other guys, and he kind of tells her to like stay in the middle of the pack, like don't show off and stuff in these competitions. Like, he doesn't want her to show off her skills. So Kane is her biggest adversary, basically. Like, he's the biggest competition for her. So we go on to have a few tests. There's like an archery test, and then they have to like scale the wall of the castle, and like capture the flag type thing and different stuff. And so people are being eliminated, but also before each one of these competitions, one of the competitors, almost every single time, there's one of them that ends up killed. So this competition's moving a little faster because people keep turning up dead. So then Celaena starts thinking, hey, this is a pattern, and so she starts trying to investigate it along with Chaol. So they also her and Chaol are taking a stroll or whatever, she comes across the clock tower. And she's also, one day, while her and Chaol are walking, they run into Kaltain, which is Duke Parrington. He's courting her. So she's came to court with him. So she is showing Nehemia around, which is the Princess of Elwë. So Celaena actually speaks Elwë, which she learned in Endovir, and she talks to Nehemia, and Nehemia's like, hey, we should be friends. So they start hanging out, and at the clock tower, there's a bunch of these like weird markings and stuff around, and she ends up finding out from Nehemia that they're called word marks, and it's some type of like ancient religion. So she's interested in them and trying to figure out what they are. Well, these marks start turning up around each of the dead people, like each of the dead competitors. So she starts looking into them in the library and stuff. Her and Dorian start kind of hanging out and like they're flirting, and then like Chaol likes her and she's always thinking about how hot he is and stuff, but like they're not really acting on anything because he's denying it. But Celaena and Dorian, they kind of have this little flirty hanging out type thing going on. Well, they know that like if she wins that it's not a good idea for them to be together, but like he's like we'll figure it out, and Chaol doesn't agree with it. Like he kind of warns her to stay away from Dorian and stuff, but she's just kind of like whatever. So in the process of all this, Dorian tells her about a puppy or a dog that had puppies, and so he ends up gifting her for Christmas the puppy, or one of them that he was going to kill because it doesn't get along with people. So she ends up taking this puppy in, and she names it Fleetfoot. She has become friends with this guy named Knox, and they start training together and stuff, and he knows that she can do better than she's doing and that she's like hiding it. So he starts training with her, and she starts teaching him like how to throw daggers better and things like that. During the one competition, while they're scaling the wall and stuff, one of the other guys tries to cut his rope. He like throws him off the side and tries to cut his rope, and Celaena swings down and saves him. Luckily, one of the guys had fallen and died, and so these two come in last, but neither one of them get eliminated because there was a guy that died. She's laying in bed one night, and she sees the tapestry that's on the wall in her bedroom kind of like fluttering and stuff, and she's like, why is that moving? All my windows are closed and stuff. So then she ends up moving the tapestry, and she finds a hidden door. So she grabs some balls of yarn and stuff and like goes down in there, and she ends up coming across what leads to the sewer. So she's like, hey, this could be my way out. But then she decides, no, I'm going to stay and work on getting my freedom. So she goes back up, and then she goes down this this other path, and the one on the right, because she's come to 3 portals, the one on the right is like giving off like creepy vibes, so she doesn't go down it. But she ends up back in her room and stuff, and she goes to sleep. And then she has a dream that she's walking through the tunnels again. So she goes down that right portal tunnel thing, and she ends up in a tomb. And so there's some sarcophagus there, and she learns that it is Elena, which is like one of the first queens. She was from Terrasen. She's Fae, and she married Haviliard or Haviliard. I don't know how to say that. Their last name, the king and the prince, they're related to the king. Gavin is his name. So it's their ancestors way back. She's looking, and there's a sword, and she's like, oh, that's Demarius. And she says it out loud, and then all of a sudden Elena's ghost pops up behind her and is like, oh, you know your history. So they start talking, and basically Elena's telling her like, there's evil in this castle, you have to win this competition, and you have to track down what this evil is and conquer it or whatever. And she's like, but why me? And she's like, just do it. So this whole time Kaltain is courting Duke Parrington, but Dorian is who she's really after. And so at one point, Dorian's mom, the queen, ends up giving him this list of like eligible maidens or whatever, and he's just not interested in getting married. But Kaltain learns about this, and she's like, hey, what can I do to win him? So then when him and Celaena start getting close, she's not happy about it, and she's trying to figure out how she can get rid of Celaena. The competition keeps going on. Celaena and Nehemia have still been friends. We find out that the king and his like soldiers killed 500 Elwë rebels. So Nehemia is obviously upset about this, and they were on their way to Calcula, which was another prison camp, and I guess some of them tried to escape, and they just killed all of them. So when Celaena was down in the tomb with Elena, Elena gave her this like amulet necklace, and so she's been wearing it since then. And it's like a little while later, Dorian asked her about it, and she's like, oh, I just found it in my jewelry box and I liked it, so I put it on. And he's like, that kind of looks like the eye of Elena. So then we learn a little backstory, and a spirit gave Elena, back in the day, gave Elena this amulet, and it protected her from Erewhon, which was the bad guy whenever she was around. And so her and her husband Gavin ended up, I guess it shocked him so much that he couldn't harm her that they were able to take him down. So then it's finally Christmas time, and I know I already said that like he gifted her the dog, but it's Christmas time, and Selena and Chaol go to like the little religious ceremony thing, like the church. They kind of fall asleep, but one of the traditions is that a bunch of kids dress up as the gods and goddesses, and they take like a token from this god or goddess, and they walk around blindfolded, and then wherever they're drawn to, they stop, and that person that they stop at gets that. So Selena ends up getting Deanna's. Deanna is the huntress and protector of the young. So there's the Yulemas ball that night, and Dorian had basically told her about it, but he's like, you can't go. So she decides that she's going to use her maid and help get a dress and a mask, because it's like a masquerade ball, and she's going to sneak in, and she's going to keep an eye on Nehemia, because she started suspecting her of being the one that's letting these monsters in to kill everybody. So Selena sneaks into the ball. Well, Chaol and Dorian they immediately see her, and Chaol ends up like kind of grabbing her, and he sticks by her side the whole night. And then eventually Nehemia leaves, and she's like, I'm not feeling well, so I'm going back to my rooms. And so she decides that she can let loose a little bit. She asks Chaol to dance, and he's like, no, Duke Parrington's already mad that you're here. Like, don't draw attention to yourself. Well, then Dorian comes over and asks her to dance, and she ends up dancing with him for a while, which is like frowned upon, because he's supposed to like, you know, play the field and dance with everybody. So they have a good time and stuff. They end up back at her room, they kiss, they make out, whatever. So then she sleeps in the next day, and then I'm not sure how much longer it is, but she ends up going back down in the tunnels, and she finds Cain down there summoning this demon down in the tunnels. And so he kind of locks her in there with it and just leaves her. And so she ends up tricking this, they call it the Ritterak, tricks it into busting down the door, and she runs into the tomb where Elena's at and gets the sword and stabs it through its head. She does get bitten though on her hand, and I guess it like poisoned her whenever she got bit. So she's running back up to her rooms, and she barely makes it there before she like blacks out. Well, she sees Nehemia right before then. Well, Nehemia ends up saving her. She knows how to use the word marks and saves her, and so they kind of like tell each other their secrets after that, after she wakes up and figures out that what Nehemia can do. Well, this competition's been going on. The King of Otterland has been gone. He's went on this like secret mission, and he's just been gone for weeks. So he returns, but everybody else in his party is dead. So Chaol is like, he's keeping something from me. Like, how did this all happen? You know, what's going on? So one night before a test, like the next test, Selena ends up telling Knox, like I think at this point there's like 5 or 6 of them left, and she tells him like he needs to leave. Like there's something dangerous going on. He kind of figures out who she is, and instead of her Lillian that she's been going by, he figures out that she's actually Selena, the Otterland's assassin. He ends up leaving in the middle of the night. They go into the competition the next day. So they're getting to the point where it's almost time for the final duel, and Kaltain and Duke Parrington are talking, and she's like suspicious of Selena, and she thinks that there's something going on weird with her. Well, Duke Parrington ends up telling her who she actually is, because he's known this whole time, and he talks her into this like scheme that they've got where before this duel, they do like a ceremonial wine thing for the last two people, and he wants her to poison the glass that Celaena's gonna drink. So the rules of the final competition is that like they're gonna duel and fight, and they have to get their opponent into a position of like certain death, but they can't actually kill him. So Celaena fights, Cain fights Renault, and he wins. It takes him 3 minutes. Celaena duels Grave, and it takes her 2 minutes. And so then these two are the ones that will do the final duel. So she has been using Nehemia's staff as her weapon. So these two go and they drink the wine, and she starts like getting blurry vision and stuff, and soon into the duel she realizes that they've drugged her. So he gets her down and he's basically just toying with her. She's like seeing shit, seeing winged creatures and stuff all around him, and so she's down basically just struggling to stay alive. And Nehemia comes over and starts like doing these word marks in the air and ends up summoning Elena and to come and help. So Elena kind of fights off all these demons that he's got floating around him, because he's like opened a portal but not everybody can see it. She ends up getting up and she has half of the staff where he like broke her staff, and she ends up jabbing him in the side with it, and so she wins the duel. Well, she turns her back and Cain starts coming after her again. So Chaol sees this and he ends up stabbing Cain and killing him. So as all this craziness is happening and they're trying to get her to a healer and stuff, Miss Kaltain down here doesn't know how to keep her mouth shut, and she's like, hey, you told me this poison was gonna work. How did she beat him? You know, what the hell's going on? And he's like, poison? What are you talking about, poison? And she's like, you gave me the poison. Like, the poison for Kuzco? That poison? So anyway, he's like, you poisoned her, oh my god. So they end up taking her to the dungeons, and he plays it off like he didn't know what was going on. So Celaena goes and she's taken care of. Dorian comes to visit her and like check on her, and then nobody's really seen Chaol for like a week, and we do find out that he's not going to be punished for killing Cain. He's just kind of like been on his own. He's been depressed because that was his first kill ever. So he comes to talk to Celaena, and he kind of asks her about like, you know, how do you deal with it. Nehemia comes to visit her and ends up giving her that Eye of Elena back because Cain had ripped it off of her, and one of Nehemia's guards had picked it up, so she returns it to her. So then it jumps to the king and Parrington, and they're kind of like plotting and talking about the experiments that they did on Cain and Kaltain, and that they don't really say what it was, but they talk about him like getting strength from it and stuff, and you know, she's a good one to experiment on and blah 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 blah, but we don't find out what actually happened. When Chaol comes to check on her, she had just broken things off with Dorian. So she's basically like, I'm the king's champion now, this isn't gonna work, like just we need to stay away from each other. He's not happy about it. Well then Chaol comes and he's looking for Dorian, and she's like, you're not gonna find him here because I broke things off. And so he's kind of excited about it, but he's still kind of denying his feelings for her. So then finally the next day she goes to see the king, and he has her sign her contract basically to be his champion. And so they're walking out, Chaol and Celaena, they've kind of become friendly and started hanging out now. And he says, do you want to know what your first job is? And she's like, nah, tell me tomorrow. And that's the end of Throne of Glass book. So then from here we'll pick up her being the king's champion in Crown of Midnight.